Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the final session of today's Leader Talk. As you guys trickle in, welcome to the Leader Talk on L&D strategy for business results in 2026, sponsored by Biz Library, InfoPro Learning, Lone Rock Leadership, SweetRush, and WeLearn. So I'm Liz Spate, the events marketing specialist here at Training Industry. And again, I'm so thrilled to have you with us here today. Again, before we get started, I would like to quickly go over a few housekeeping items to help you interact with our speaker and get the most out of today's program. So again, feel free to use that chat window for any comments and questions. This is going to be a very interactive session. So open up those chat windows. Let us know how you're enjoying today's session, as well as dropping in those questions throughout, and we will try to address those throughout. If we don't have enough time, we will, of course, the WeLearn team will reach out and address those questions as well. Additionally, once the session ends, a brief survey will appear in your browser, so please take a moment to share your feedback on the session speakers. And all of our sessions are being recorded and archived on trainingindustry.com, and you will receive a follow-up email from us today with the link to the on-demand program for you to share with your team. Now, again, if this is your first event with us, we would love to welcome you. Training Industry exists to make connections among learning and development professionals, and we offer tons of resources to support your role in L&D, like live events like today's Leader Talk, as well as through articles on our website, our magazine, conferences, research reports, our podcasts, our courses. We have a list. We would also love to hear about what you've learned from today's session on social media, so please follow us on your favorite platform so we can continue the conversation. And without further ado, it's my pleasure to introduce you to these lovely ladies. Roberta is an HR industrial go-to market leader and Lighthouse Research and Advisory analyst. She has been behind the scenes at market-leading companies to help shift market narratives, influence buyer behavior, and expand into new markets. And then Loren brings 2 decades of expertise in healthcare, HR, and L&D, and is a strategy consulting partner at WeLearn Learning Services, known as a professional syndrist. She specializes in organizational effectiveness, talent acquisition, and leadership development. So with that, ladies, take it away.
Thank you so much, Liz. We are really happy to be with you all today and have this opportunity to share some very exciting data on L&D strategy. We believe this is an industry first to have this much qualitative data on learning strategy, and we hope you and your teams will find it super valuable. And I've been a little warning. I've been told my slides are copy heavy. That's because I want you all to have the data when you get your copy of the slides. So no need to read them all. If that's not your thing, we'll be talking through them anyway. So with that, let's get started. So I'd like to start with a question we hear constantly from L&D leaders. Loren, if you could pop over to the next slide. How mature is your learning strategy compared to your peers? So it's the question everyone asks, but really has the data to speak to it. So before we dive in, let's see where the room stands. If you could get your answers in. I'll give it a few seconds more. There's a lot of no bleeping ideas. Great. Okay. So let's share the results there. So we can see 57% of you have no bleeping idea. 34% say I kind of know, and 9% are I definitely know. So it's very interesting. Keep your answer in mind as we go through today's findings. You'll be able to see exactly how you compare. Let's go into the research then. So here's what we're working with today. There's a bit of background about the research. We collected data from 118 L&D leaders. They completed a learning strategy scorecard, which is a self-assessment that covered 6 dimensions: alignment to business strategy, learning governance, technology and ecosystem integration, content and experience strategy, measurement and analytics, and culture and change readiness. There were 30 questions in total, each rated on a 5-point scale. Scores range from 30 to 150 and get categorized into 4 different maturity levels. This gave us a solid foundation to identify patterns, so like where organizations are strong, where they struggle, and what separates those that are really breaking through today. So, who responded to this? Just quickly, a background. About 40% came from large organizations over 5,000 employees, half from mid-sized companies. There were 27 industries represented. A big chunk of them respondents were in manufacturing, financial services, and healthcare. Um, Here's an important number to take note of. So 56% reported having a formal strategy in place. Uh, is that shocking? Is that standard? We're here to decide that. But here's what we need to acknowledge, that really the sample skews towards already engaged L&D leaders, people who take assessments like this already thinking about strategies. So if anything, these results are probably a lot more optimistic than the field as a whole.
I think it's really important right now that all of you who are here take a moment to congratulate yourself for being here, for caring about this, because as we know, the organizations who really need this stuff aren't always the ones who show up, aren't always the people who are intentional about doing the work of accountability and finding out. Sometimes we like to put our head in the ground. We don't want to know. The people who don't care aren't taking assessments. So we're hearing from people who are invested, and you're here because you care, which puts you ahead of a lot of your peers, regardless of what the survey shows when you take it.
So before we get into the findings, I'd like, Loren, I'd love it if you could walk us through the maturity model. Loren co-designed this scorecard along with WeLearn CEO Sean Stowers. So she can speak best, obviously, to the model and how we arrived at these levels. So straight from the source, Loren, take it away.
Sure. Thanks so much, Roberta. The latter is really what you're looking at is how learning shifts from reacting to demand, shaping outcomes, and what has to change at each stage for that impact to scaffold or compound. It's a progression model. It shows how learning systems evolve. So, just like what we do with people, we kind of did with the maturity model, it's about your operating posture. And a lot of times I get asked, well, can you move from reactive to transformational just like that? And the reality is, no, you can't skip rungs. You have to stabilize each one before you can move to the next one. So when we built this, what we really looked at were factors that came up most consistently across high performing L&D teams. Then we categorized those into 4 different levels. So reactive is more of your compliance driven learning. You're responding to requests as they come in. Your operational is you've got some structure, a little bit of alignment to business goals, you know what's important, but your L&D team's still primarily seen as a support function and not a strategic partner. When you're getting to the strategic level, that's when you're using data consistently to inform your decisions and you've got some leadership sponsorship. And I want to make it really clear when we talk about leadership sponsorship, that's not something you can do by yourself. That is a partnership that has to be co-created. And then when you're getting into transformational, you've adapted based on what you learned in the strategic point, but learning fully gets embedded by the time you're transformational. So it's not supporting the business, it's driving the business. And this is where we become a growth engine and aren't looked at as just another cost center, which is a space that we often end up in.
Thanks, Loren. So the juicy bits, where do organizations stand? So over 80% of organizations scored at the reactive or operational level. The average score was 86 out of 150, so that was squarely in operational territory, and only 22 organizations, 1 in 5, reached strategic or transformational. So the conclusion from that, most learning functions have moved past reactive, compliance-driven approaches. Great, that's the good news, but they haven't arrived at strategic impact. They're kind of stuck in the middle in limbo.
And I'd really like to get a pulse check from all of you out there. If you feel like your organization is kind of in this space of limbo, would you just drop an emoji in the chat and let us know what that feels like? Nobody feels like they're in limbo?
There's not a lot of feelings.
Okay, wait, here they come. Here they come. Yeah, oh,
Okay.
got some good emojis. I got everything from smiling to face palms to frowny faces. Yeah, so
Crying. Oh, Valerie.
it sounds like people feel a little bit in limbo, and that's that place where we're just
Hmm.
past compliance, but we're not quite strategic yet.
Right. So what is holding L&D back? Um, the data reveals 6 specific gaps that explain why organizations stall and what separates those who are breaking through. We're going to walk through each one: strategy, KPI, governance, AI readiness, measurement, and leadership modeling. And we're going to start with the strategy gap. So, gap one is the biggest differentiator in the entire data set. Organizations with a formal documented strategy score 25 points higher than those without, which is a huge gap. So if you look at the breakdown here, organizations with a strategy averaging 94, those with a strategy in development average 78, and those with no strategy around 69. So here's what's interesting, that in development is only 9 points above no strategy, but it's 16 points below having a completed strategy. So the benefit really doesn't come from starting, it comes from finishing. Like, a half-built strategy does not actually get you halfway there. You've really got to complete it. So why does that matter? Why does documenting strategy matter? So think about it like a road trip with a documented plan. You know your route, you know your contingencies, you know why you're making each stop. Without a plan, every gas station becomes a decision, right? You're like a 12-year-old with $100 note. You're distracted by everything that's shiny. A learning strategy is not set and forget. Markets change, business conditions change, priorities shift. But with a documented strategy, you know where you're adapting from, right? You have a baseline there and you can make informed adjustments instead of just reacting. So I really liked this quote. It's actually from Sean Stowers: "Your strategy is your organization's promise in motion." What about not having time? Like, this is an objection we hear a lot. We don't have time to develop a strategy. Loren, I know you have really strong thoughts on this.
I do. And my biggest thought is right in the middle here. The reality is you don't have time not to. We can't build a house on something that isn't solid. We know this, the house will fall apart. What happens when you don't have a strategy, or why do we often not have strategy? It's because we're too busy doing the work. We don't have time to plan. And when we do that, the work suffers because of that. And in L&D, whether we like to admit it or not, we kind of fall to that people pleasing behavior. We want to deliver with excellence. So we jump straight into solutioning, sometimes before we plan anything. And if everything is urgent, we know nothing is urgent at all. And if everything is urgent, nothing is finessed. And that becomes an even harder challenge when you're trying to speak about strategy or talk about strategy. The work is more effective when you have a plan of how to do it. It takes time on the front end, but at the back end, you're going to see the results because of the time and effort that you put in. Your strategy is what ensures that your practice ties everything to the business results. We don't have time for strategy means we don't have time for alignment. Good strategy will reduce the friction everywhere else.
So speaking of tying to business results, let's see where the room stands. How would you rate your organization's ability to tie initiatives to business KPIs? So let's spend a few seconds here as you get your results in.
And Roberta, as they're getting results, I'm seeing a couple things in the chat.
Mm-hmm.
Heidi says it helps you know where you're adapting from. Benjamin says companies see 17% increased productivity from training programs. The time pays for itself. And then Meg says, can you suggest tools or templates to plan strategy, top down or bottom up? What works best? And I'm going to say, Meg, we're going to answer that question. We might have some tools and topics that will help you that we can talk about a little bit towards the end here. And Sarah says, this is a conversation we've been having recently. How do we tie them to our KPIs and then isolate those KPIs to training specifically?
Thanks, Loren. And just now the results came in. So we've got like pretty mixed responses. There's no 0% at fully mature. Loren, what do you think of this distribution?
I think it is pretty indicative of of what we expected to see.
Yeah. Well, let's see how this compares to what we found. Okay. So gap 2, the KPI gap. L&D claims alignment, but can't prove it. So look at these scores. Regular conversations with executive stakeholders at 3.35. Learning strategy supports business goals. These all sound pretty good. But business leaders see L&D as a strategic enabler, a bit lower, and learning tied to performance metrics at 2.75. So what this tells us is that the conversations are happening. The connection to measurable results, however, is not. L&D is talking to leadership, but haven't really closed the loop. So the blunt truth is that, being in the room isn't enough, really.
And I want to address a couple of the things happening in chat here because they're interesting. Sean has explained that we have a lot of templates for building strategy on our website. Yes, those are free. We even have a free course on creating a learning strategy. So if you head to the WeLearn website, you can find a lot of free tools there. So just calling that out based on the question that was asked. Heidi says she loves having an L&D strategy, but it's not always seen as necessary by leadership. I think I'll do it anyway, LOL. And the reality is, the better you can get at creating your own strategy, the closer you can get to the business results that the business is looking for. So doing it anyway really matters because it helps you get better business acumen as you start to pull the understanding of those things together, because eventually it's going to come around and your leadership's going to see it. Amanda says it seems like the ties to KPI are more of a stretch and not strong enough. A lot of that depends on how they're presented to you. Sometimes they're so high level that you have to kind of think about what it means beyond that. And the reality is, I'm a big fan of reverse engineering. And so when we get into talking about measurement, I'll talk about that a little bit more. But I will also say, like I say, anytime that we get on stage in front of anyone, if you have questions, you are more than welcome to reach out to us. And we are happy to just have a conversation with you because we love talking about all of this. But getting back to our plan here, where access does not equal influence, every other part of the business, if you think about it, every other department, marketing, sales, IT, everybody is trusted for their ability to deliver based on their expertise. Everybody except learning. So why is that? It's because we're not good at talking about the value that we create. And even if we're good at it, we're probably not as good at proving it. And if we can pull those two things together, articulating the value and proving it with the data, we become better trusted by all of the people that we look to support on a regular basis. People always talk about, how do I get a seat at the table? The reality is you are the table. You connect to every single thing. Every chair, think of every chair as a department. Who's in the middle of it all? You are. You're the hub of that wheel. But we have to prove it. And being in the conversation is just not enough. You have to connect those learning numbers to numbers that the leadership cares about. And doing that takes time and work and effort beyond sometimes what we're comfortable with.
All right, the third gap. So is the governance gap. And that showed the widest variation, actually, of any dimension we looked at. Some organizations have robust structures, many have none. There was learning initiatives prioritized at enterprise level at 2.83, cross-functional governance 2.32. What this means is decisions that get made without consistent structures, and priorities basically shift based on who's in the room or who's talking loudest, rather than there being a systematic evaluation, which means it's not really strategy but noise. So what does good governance look like? It's not really about centralized versus decentralized. It's more how you call balls and strikes. Like, how do you intake requests for L&D? How do you decide what to invest in? How is that aligned to business strategy? What do you measure? Without clear decision criteria, you're just really throwing things at the wall to see what sticks.
And I'm kind of giggling over here as I'm looking at the chat because Dana says development's wanted for new training at our company, but time is not dedicated to it. They're one-off projects, so it's difficult to emphasize training when we don't have time to develop it, even though it's recognized that it's needed. And changing the mindset is hard. And I think everybody in the audience, Dana, agrees with you right now. That mindset is hard, but the closer we can get to connecting all of these things, the better we're going to be able to get it. Not having to do what I like to call is developing it as fast as we can, flipping it over the wall and starting the next thing. But when we talk about good governance, a lot of this comes down to, and this will help you get where you're trying to go to as you're looking for that connection point. Decision criteria and accountability become really important. Who's responsible for what? Who's actually accountable at the end of the day? I'm a planner and I'm a project management type mindset person. So I really love the RACI model, which tells you who's responsible, accountable, consulted, and informed. If you have that clarity, sometimes it can help a lot with your decision criteria because it helps people stay in their own lane and know their roles. So decisions get made faster and better and sometimes easier. But we don't plan for everything that gets muddled. And muddled governance leads to wasted investment. And just a good example of this, because people always ask me, how can we govern things? L&D owns all of our tools. And I say, but do they? I know in big companies, and I worked for a Fortune 4 for a number of years in learning leadership. And think about something like your LMS or your authoring tools. You might own the content, but who owns the updates? Who owns and makes decisions on the metadata? I know the experience I've had, one of our authoring tools needed updates on a regular basis, but it was like an act of God to get IT to make the updates because you had to get 27 approvals. So we were always working with the system that was behind the times because the updates were happening faster than our IT team could make them happen. And we didn't have anybody that could do it in our world. But governance helps to take care of some of that because you're making the decisions at the front end. And Geraldine says an L&D updates aren't a priority. Yeah. Until they are, right? It's like kind of like with IT people. I talk to a lot of IT people on a regular basis, and it's like nobody knows you exist until they need you, or nobody worries about you. You're kind of the under the radar until somebody needs you or until something breaks. So make friends with your IT people because y'all are in the same bucket a lot of times trying to prove your value.
Exactly. Let's dive into the AI readiness gap a little bit. This was probably not surprisingly the lowest score in the entire data set. Strategy for AI and automation in learning was barely passed, not yet in place. Learner data for personalization was low. Roadmap for evolving tech stack also low. The weakness is really universal, regardless of company size or industry. Everyone seems to be struggling. And, before we talk about what the AI gap tells us, we really need to acknowledge up front that, everybody's tired of hearing about AI. There's fatigue out there. Loren, I'd love to hear your thoughts on what the AI gap tells us.
I think the data tells us that L&D hasn't figured out where AI is going or what role they play in it. And we know because we're human and we work with humans every day and we realize the impact of humanity. We know humans in the loop matter, but I'm not sure that we always know what that should look like. And if you feel, I just need to know if you feel like AI fatigue is a thing, like everybody's talking about AI all the time, give me an emoji because I want to know I'm not alone when I'm feeling the AI fatigue. I see lots of emojis. So let me ask
Yeah.
you, what role is AI playing in your organization right now? I'd love to know in the chat. I'm still getting emojis. So, Ariel says, not even sure where to begin. Virtually none. Big co-pilot, trying to stay away from it, utilizing it in production and training. Some are using it efficiently, some are still trying to figure it out, using AI to get rid of administrative tasks so we can focus on what matters. Not much. Using it to create content, just starting to use it. Not sure how to apply it best. These are going faster than I can keep up with, but I'm seeing a lot of the same stuff. It's kind of a combination of we're using it to remove things that are repetitive, but we're also trying to figure out how it's going to work best for us and how we work with what is locked down and what isn't. So organizations are invested but afraid is a lot of what that sounds like. And we talk about this on a regular basis. So it's great to hear this from all of you. And I want you to see from each other that you're not alone in how you're feeling about this. And this is my encouragement to you to, take down some of the names of the folks who you are feeling strongly like you're connecting with through the chat and reach out to them, have a conversation. Roberta, I'm going to send it back to you.
Thank you. Well, let's move to measurement, which is actually the most predictive dimension in the data. Let's run a quick poll. What does your organization primarily measure? Let's give it a few seconds. And once we get those in, we can keep those scores in mind as we can see how that compares to the data set we have. All right, a few more seconds. Pretty big mix, mostly completions, attendance, sentiment data, smile sheets, which is what we would expect to see, really. Some 17% business impact ROI, a few not sure where to start, behavior change on the job, 6%, knowledge retention. Does everyone see the results? Around 60% is at completions. All right. So the measurement gap, let's get into that. So this dimension predicted basically everything else. Measurement had the strongest correlation of all the dimensions with overall maturity. It was almost a direct relationship at 0.87. The three questions most predictive of high scores all relate to business impact. So if you want to know where your organization will land on maturity, you really need to look at how the organization measures. There's a little nuance here that I thought was important. The pattern that we saw is that metrics often get communicated to leadership, but dashboards that inform strategic decisions scored a lot lower. In other words, the data was getting shared, but it didn't really speak to changing what happened next. So it's important to look at reporting and how it differs from measurement. So for example, if 500 people take a course, 90% passed, 75% were happy, that's reporting. Measurement asks very different questions, right? Like, did customer interactions change? Did errors go down? Did something specific to your organization? Did time to competency improve? Did it move a number that the business really cares about? Measurement is what really goes beyond the four walls of L&D. And it means talking to stakeholders, data teams, and other parts of the organization to put the story together. And it's really not just data, it's storytelling. Loren, I know you have a lot of thoughts on this distinction as well.
I'm going to probably age myself here a little bit, but I want to know, shoot me an emoji or give me a reaction if you remember the book Telling Ain't Training. It's super old, like me. Anybody remember that book? I see a couple. So if you think about it this way, telling is your reporting, right? And when you've actually done the training, that's really what you're trying to measure the impact of those results. Dana says, let's not date ourselves here. So I know you're my kindred spirit out there somewhere. But the reality is reporting tells you what happened and measurement tells you if it mattered. And we tend to avoid metrics, not because we're incapable of doing them or sharing them, but because sometimes they're really not clear. If we learn to chunk metrics the way that we chunk learning content, our leaders would better understand them. And if we stopped thinking about it as, oh my gosh, nobody told me there would be math, uh, then it's a little bit more palatable because we're thinking about the outcome, not the output. So reporting and data is the information. The measurement is the story. That story is what has the narrative and it gives people information about what the data is telling us. We can can't talk. We can report on completions all day long, but that doesn't really tell a story, even if it's what our stakeholders want. It's what they think they want. It's not really what they want. And the story is what's going to resonate and make a difference to the stakeholders, especially if they're the ones that give you money. The story is what gets you more budget. It gets you more people. It's what moves your L&D from cost center to strategic partner. But I really want to touch on the person that said, I don't even know where to start with this. I'm going to give you the biggest unlock in the entire world, in my opinion. You don't have to agree with me, but here's what I think the biggest unlock is. When you're thinking about KPIs and when you're thinking about measurement, and you go to your stakeholders and they're like, I don't know what the KPIs are, because, we've all heard that at some point. Ask them, what is it that you measure your people on at the end of the year? What are they responsible for in their performance review? Friends, if that does not tie to the objectives of your learning program, something is wrong because that's what your business cares about getting the results for. Now, if you can take that and build a rubric around it about what good looks like as somebody is new, maybe 6 months in role, maybe completely able to do their job, no fail or expert level, whatever you want to label those rubric categories, you can do two things. You can build measurement for your training program, but you can also help your frontline leader performance manage and trust me, they struggle to do that as much as you struggle to measure what the data should look like and how to build it in your learning programs. And I hope that is helpful to you. And we will move on.
There's an interesting question from Leonardo, Loren, if we can answer it. Which is the main KPI to measure if you are just starting to demonstrate impact through learning metrics?
I think it's the one that matters most to your business. So I have this saying that I call the WIMI. If you're working with a stakeholder and you say, everyone's always talking about WIFM, what's in it for me? What's in it for me? Tell your stakeholders what's in it for me. I'm going to copyright this, but I believe we measure with the WIMI. And WIMI stands for what is most important. If you ask your stakeholder what is most important, they're going to tell you. I can't tell you what's most important for your stakeholder, but they sure can. And if you hear it directly from their words and their mouth, you're going to know what to measure because you're going to know the thing that matters most to them. That's how you're going to demonstrate the impact.
Great. Let's let's move on to the leadership modeling gap. This is the final gap. Culture shows the smallest internal spread of any dimension, but the gap still matters. And the data told us that, across the board, we got learning embedded in company culture at 3.14. Employees feel supported to learn at 3.08. Leaders modeling continuous learning at 2.67. That's the lowest score in this dimension. Organizations basically say that learning is valued, but leaders are not showing it. Loren, this is really your area. What do you see here?
Before I answer that, I just want to point to a answer in the chat from Brian to everyone, saying that it's difficult if we don't start the conversation with what does success look like and how do we measure it. And this kind of flows from measurement into culture in and of itself. And the difficulty is within the stakeholder also needing to shift their mindset to an engagement model. And sometimes your stakeholder thinks engagement is the most important thing. But when we talk about culture, this also plays into that, which is why I wanted to stop there and call out that particular comment, because I think it's valuable here. Culture here is about the behavior, and we're talking about the leader behavior. And the culture may say, hey, we think learning is important. The question is, okay, you think learning is important. Does that show up in what we do about it? There's a ton of data out in the marketplace showing that when leaders are invested in learning programs, that the results improve dramatically. Simple example, when you roll something out, instead of L&D sending out the invite, have the department leader send it and say how excited they are about the program that you're invited to. You'll get better participation, you'll get better engagement, you'll get better results because they care about what their leaders care about. Depending on where you sit at L&D, especially if you're in an L&D related HR, oh God, another HR email. I really don't want to read this. Can I just delete it? Do I have to go? It's so completely different when it's coming from the leader. But that one small thing can show you what's possible. And when leaders participate, even better, whether they teach a component of your learning or they do a podcast that you put into the learning program or a video, the results improve again. So use your leaders, even if you do a monthly L&D podcast, pulling your leaders in, interviewing them about what they're learning, bringing them into your conversations. Your leader can be a poster child for your learning programs.
Mm-hmm.
Your best marketing is getting your leaders to model the behavior that you want to see. And so I'm curious from you, are you doing that? And if you are, how do you involve your business leaders in your learning? Can you drop that in the chat, please? I'm just pausing to see if we get any chats. They like the idea.
Yep.
Is anyone doing that? Brian says sales enablement rules theirs for sales. Valerie says we haven't had that until Q4 of last year when they launched a company-wide in-person leadership program. Valerie, if you'd respond in the chat how that went. Shannon says we've hosted book clubs based on C-suite book recs. Heidi's working with her senior leadership on a team coaching program, brought in a coach that they've worked with before. And as it goes, she wants to encourage them to share their learning with the company to model why it matters and how they're developing individually and as a team. Sonia has included a couple of her leaders to present some leadership modules. So hopefully this is working well for you. You should see some great results from it. Chad says, I haven't considered, most would say no time, conflicting priorities. And I would push back on you a little and say you might be surprised if you tell them how valuable it would be. And Valerie responded, they train nearly 300 leaders nationwide. And I know we only have about 7 minutes left, so I'm going to keep us moving towards our path forward.
Thank you. So the next couple of slides are quick, but unfortunately, we probably won't have a lot of time for questions at the end. So if you do have questions, you could get them into the chat and we can make sure we get back to everybody via email or in a follow-up. So what separates those that made it to strategic and transformational? It was the connection of programs to results and proving it. There's a really interesting data point from a training industry pulse survey last year. At the end of last year, 57% of L&D leaders said they lacked confidence in their learning plans or didn't have a plan at all. And at the same time, 60% said that if they had a budget increase, they put it into training and content. And these two statistics just really don't align. Like, why would you spend your budget on training if it's not tied to a solid plan? Because we know that more programs doesn't equal more impact. So as a summary in our qualitative data, what we saw is that organizations that broke through, they had a documented strategy, they measured for business impact, they had governance structures, and they got leaders involved.
And I think the bottom line is this: you need to know where you are if you want to know where you're going. And that's why the scorecard exists. It gives you a baseline. Until you have that baseline, it's really hard to build anything. And I want to remind you that doing this is not a punitive thing. It's a purely diagnostic tool. It's not judgmental. It's not anything other than a starting line and a way to align you and your leaders in your department with data around the same truth.
So this we really put together as the 5 priorities and the takeaway from this session. Feel free when you get the deck to print it out and share with your teams. And what I really want to do is share the scorecard with you that all of this data came from. So if we could pull that up, if you've not taken the scorecard yet, scan the QR code on the next slide. And the assessment itself is about 10 minutes long. You'll get a personalized report with your scores and recommendations. And I believe Sean's already dropped a link in the chat for anybody who had trouble with the QR code to the scorecard. But once you complete it, you'll see exactly how you compare to these 118 organizations. And we're actually collecting a lot more data, and we'll be releasing a quarterly report that's updated. So it'll be interesting where people are at with AI strategy in a couple of months from now. So I think we're at about time. We've probably got time for one quick question. And anything else that's left unanswered, we'll make sure we get to. So if anybody has a question that's been asked and not been answered, there's been a lot of chat, we may have missed something along the way.
I just want to say how much I appreciate the chat interaction. There's a lot of really good ideas that all of you are sharing with each other in the chat. And I'm hoping that all of you are reading the chat as you go, because it is really fantastic. And
Thanks,
connect
everyone.
with each other. Connect with each other, please. It makes us all better. And connect with us.
Alrighty. So thank you all for joining us today. We hope it was valuable. Take the scorecard if it resonates. And of course, reach out to us if you want to continue the conversation. And with that, I'll hand it back to Liz. Thank you, Liz. Thank you, Lauren. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. I was going to say, Lauren, do you want to sneak something in before I kick us all out and say our goodbyes?
I just want to say, seriously, reach out to us if you have questions. We love having conversations with you about everything and anything learning, because as our CEO, Sean Stower, says, learning is human, and we are all human. We are all learning together.
I love it. I love it. All of the love going on right now. This is such a good way to end the session. Thank you so much, ladies, for that. And thank you for our audience sticking with us for all 5 sessions. Way to kick off the year, and it's just going to keep getting better. So thank you so much. I'm going to steal the screen because although we are near the end, I do have some lovely things to share. So I want to give a big shout out to all of our sponsors: Biz Library, InfoPro Learning, Lone Rock Leadership, SweetRush, and WeLearn. Additionally, all of our sessions today are pre-qualified for a credit hour by SHRM, HRCI, ISPI, and CBTN. So send an email to me or anybody on the TI team, and we will get you those codes ASAP. Additionally, I would love to meet you all here in Raleigh, North Carolina for the 2026 Training Industry Conference and Expo. And the WeLearn team is a platinum sponsor at TICE. So if you do want more, TICE is the place to be. If you don't know what TICE is, it's essentially where learning leaders like you gather to forge new professional connections, you learn from each other, and you address your most pressing learning challenges. So we do have an early bird sale right now all the way through March, so check that out. Additionally, if you're looking to elevate your L&D career, our CBTM program is rooted in industry-leading research and is designed to take your L&D career to the next level, so you can earn your CBTM credentials to develop that core training management competencies today. If you would like, go check that out. So additionally, one last reminder, an additional survey will pop up in your browser upon exiting, and we would greatly welcome your feedback. Thank you again for all of us joining today. But lastly, I am Liz, and I just wanted to let you know to have a great day, and I hope to see you all very soon. Bye, everybody.